All right, welcome everyone to our Employer Spotlight, Creating a Diverse and Inclusive Workplace for You panel this afternoon. We're very excited to get started. We have our panelists from Qualtrics, Josiah Ross-Deutscher, a panelist from Brex, Paige Evanich, and KIAH Williams from JCPenney. My name is Molly Coughlin. I will be co-moderating the panel along with Abby Cahill. I am a corporate outreach manager in business career services, as well as a David Eccles School of Business alum. I graduated from the program in marketing in May of 2019. So now I'm going to pass it on to Abby to do a short introduction, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Molly. Hello, everyone. My name is Abby Cahill. I am a senior in business marketing and also studying sales. So I have a sales emphasis. I'm very lucky and fortunate to be here this afternoon with all of these great panelists. I'm a business career ambassador, and I'm really excited to get this started. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. So first, I go ahead, Molly.
I just want to add in one more quick thing before we get started. Make sure to put any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. We've got about 15 to 20 minutes that we'll go through and answer any and all questions that you may have for our panelists. To get started, then we'll go ahead and just do a few introductions from each of our panelists. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a little bit about the company that you work for as well. KIAH, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I'm KIAH Williams. I graduated from Westminster College with my degree in finance and a minor in music. So that's really what I'm passionate about. That's what I do when I'm not working is I sing. I was a vocal performance emphasis, and I also play a few instruments. And then as far as work goes, I am an annual inventory analyst at JCPenney. So I handle basically all of the inventory counts that happen for JCPenney. So when we go in and count all of the merchandise in the store to make sure that we reconcile that, that's what I handle.
Paige, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Molly. So my name is Paige, and I'm actually really excited to talk to you all today because my journey has changed quite a bit since I was sitting in a lot of your shoes right now. I graduated from Penn State with a degree in hospitality and actually went back for a pre-med degree as well. Started working in the tech space for a medical startup based out of Toronto and fell in love with the tech world. Led to my move to Utah a couple years ago and started working with a Y Combinator startup that's here in the Valley. And now leading to my current role here with Brex, being a business recruiter started off really growing out the Salt Lake office and now have expanded to being a remote first company and really working with hiring managers and teams across all offices of Brex. So if you're not familiar, Brex is a fintech company that is pretty much about 3 years old and really, reimagining and how we do our financial services from a B2B perspective. So thank you.
I think that means I'm next, right? Great. First off, just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to come. It definitely feels like an honor to be here. My name is Josiah Ross-Deutscher. I've been at Qualtrics for about 4.5 years now. During that time, I've done a handful of functions, but currently I'm a senior experience analyst on the people operations team, focusing on using data to deliver on key moments in the employee journey. When I'm not doing that, I am working on various initiatives such as our Q groups, which are our employee resource groups, as well as working on some of our global wellness programming as well.
Awesome. We have a great panel here. Everyone has different backgrounds and can bring something to the table that I think it'll be a great dialogue that we'll have going on. So I want to kind of start off with the first question that I'll pose to all of you. And the question is, how do either you or your company bring value to employees through diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, great. I'll kind of answer maybe a little bit of both of those. So I'll start with, so for myself, for the past 4 years, I've been pretty heavily involved in various roles and functions surrounding diversity and inclusion, whether that's surrounding helping start a couple of our Q groups, or working on a handful of other initiatives. The company as a whole has made some pretty serious commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion over the past couple of years. Each one of our teams is starting to set up their own individual action plans. We've rolled out unconscious bias training across our whole company, and then we've also brought in guest speakers like Ibram Kendi to talk about anti-racism. So it's a pretty huge focus for us at Qualtrics.
I can follow that up as well. So from the Brex company standpoint, it has been a focus top of mind from every level and every department as we've grown. So some of the things that we've really set up from a company standpoint is, having the support for our 9 ERG groups or communities that we have set up within Brex. We also, given that actually our founders are immigrants, we set up a immigration council pretty much since day one, to really support sponsorship for new team members coming on board with Brex and just ongoing support as they are for our current talent. We also have introduced a employee-led D&I committee to lead some of those initiatives and really collaborate with the leadership team, as well as pulse surveys that we really analyze as a team from every level and department and actually share transparently throughout the company. And something we're most excited about too more recently is our remote first company initiative that we're going for to really help enhance and open up opportunities to geographical and socioeconomic diversity as well. So very exciting things to come on board.
Yeah, and with JCPenney, we've recently been having a lot of conversations around diversity and inclusion, where we're meeting with upper level management, even with the CEO, and having those open and honest conversations about diversity and inclusion. We've started a inclusion council where it's run by certain people who are nominated to be on this council or who volunteer to be on this council to really speak to diversity and inclusion and make sure that there are no issues going on with that. We've also have a mentorship program with that as well. And, with JCPenney, when James Cash Penney founded the company, he started it as the Golden Rule Company. So, every day with JCPenney, we strive to treat others how you would want to be treated. And, we're really trying to educate ourselves and the people around us about, racism and really promote equality and fairness.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All of those answers are very interesting, and you all bring different points to the table that your companies, it seems like, really are making efforts to include diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Have any of you seen some data or results personally or through talking with your employees about how some of these efforts have benefited the company or have been working or seen results?
I've definitely been seeing some results in just speaking with my coworkers and management. They've really said that this year, especially with everything that's been going on, it's just been a really eye-opening year and experience to have some of these different conversations and having people really feel comfortable speaking up about different things that are going on. Whereas, before, when you're not really having those conversations with upper level management, you may not feel comfortable going to anyone and speaking up. So now a lot of people have been more comfortable with that. And so you just feel definitely a change. I know I've felt a change through having these conversations. So it's been really great.
Yes, and to kind of, add on that just from a, personal note. So we here at Brex implemented transparent pay equity reviews. And what that is we actually review and adjust total compensation biannually to ensure, pay equity across gender and race, by geographic market, especially as we've now announced going remote. And so personally, I've seen a lot of this, come into effort with really aligning my strategic conversations with my manager around those timelines and what that looks like for my growth. We actually share internally too what the data looks like as far after each comp cycle, how many promotions were in place. Kind of leads into a new thing that we've tracked from a people perspective is, not just what underrepresented hiring looks like from a diversity pipeline perspective, but also internal mobility. It's a huge factor for us. So, today we could pretty much say 39% of our managers, identify as women, and we're making that a focus to, really increase those efforts. So I think data is extremely important to leverage in a lot of these initiatives and just, recapping on the strategy moving forward.
So we do a lot of as the experience management company, we do a lot of different types of data collection, whether that's operational data and tracking, our hiring, our pay, promotion, all of those different processes. We do have metrics that we surround that really focus on DEI. One of the ones that I will share today is more surrounding some of our experiential data. So one of the things that we do that we measure quarterly is actually the FIRE index, which is the Fairness, Inclusion, Respect, and Equity Index, which we actually create individual action plans that roll up from team to region to the company as a whole. Over the past 4 years that I've been at Qualtrics, we have made some pretty substantial strides, both on the operational side of what do our employees look like as a whole, but also on closing that gap of the FIRE index as a whole. And some of the things that we have realized as a company is that it's, as a company, to consistently progress, it's important to have various different viewpoints, because whenever you have the same viewpoints in the same areas, it really creates an echo chamber, and that doesn't allow individuals or the company to progress as a whole. And so those are some of the reasons why we do measure the things that we do, is so that we can continually have that progress.
Great, thank you all. And it sounds like too, all of these initiatives really align with kind of your company's mission and your goal as well. Like KIAH, you were saying about being the golden rule company, just using your kind of use of Qualtrics as your product to even kind of manage the data of it all. And Paige speaking about your founders being immigrants themselves and kind of how that's impacted your initiatives as well at Brex. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about kind of your senior leadership team and how involved they are in D&I initiatives, what that looks like, and kind of what overall impact that has on the culture of each of your companies as well.
I can lead that off. So I would say, DEI, as I mentioned, is definitely top of mind here at Brex. I think ultimately the way we view this is we would love to see like DEI initiatives like embedded within every team member's role versus having it as a separate thought overall. And I think, the support comes from our leadership team. We actually just added women to our leadership, or excuse me, 3 women to our leadership team more recently that are really helping drive those conversations. Perfect example of this is we had a pulse survey that showcased we had some areas of opportunity within, really engaging around people who identify as women at Brex. And really, so that follow-up was creating a voluntary women's focus group. Leadership team led this, and it was really curated around building a better Brex and providing a safe space to where we were able to share our experiences, opinions, as well as collaborate on problem solving and action planning for the future. We had several other leadership team members that identify as male within these groups to also ask questions, directly on, just for their insight as well. And so I think having that listening into an action plan was really important. And, those were led by a lot of the leadership, initiatives to start off with as well.
Yeah, I think DEI is something that permeates Qualtrics as a whole, but our leadership is very dedicated to it. We know that DEI, much like anything else that's important, is a continuum, and it's continually important to progress on that. Due to that, our leadership is very involved. What some examples are, Ryan, for 3 months, matched any donations to the NAACP legal defense funds. It's how our employee resource groups, or our Q groups, as what we call at Qualtrics, each one of them has an executive sponsor. We even just hired a new DEI lead so that they could really be spearheading that. And all of those things as a combination really do impact our culture in a pretty large way. It's one thing to say something, and it's one thing to believe something, but when you see it take action, it kind of creates it creates the culture. For context, Qualtrics itself is a system of action, and that system of action causes impact. And when you see the actions being exemplified from your leadership, whether it's the highest level, our executives, our frontline managers, or even our individual contributors, it really trailblazes a path for the company culture to consistently develop. And because of that, we've been able to create an incredible environment for our employees.
Sorry, couldn't get off mute. Yeah, so at JCPenney, I mean, our leadership is very involved in diversity and inclusion, especially our CEO. She identifies as a woman, and half of her executive team are women, and like 80% of our workforce is actually women. And so it's really important for all of us to foster that open communication. And even more recently, as I was saying, we've had conversations with senior leadership about diversity and inclusion. And I think it's really those conversations that have started to change our culture. Not to say that it was bad before, but it's just feels more open and free now to have those conversations, because a lot of the time, I'll be honest, like a lot of people aren't going to care all the time about diversity and inclusion, and that's just the way that real life is, as we all know. And so I think it's really been great to have those open conversations so that you can start feeling comfortable talking to people who may have expressed in the past that they don't care about diversity and inclusion. And it really starts from the top down, and having those conversations there and seeing that we're implementing different policies and processes and teams that focus on diversity and inclusion, and making that a priority so that everyone underneath can see that that is a priority and make it a priority for themselves as well.
Great, perfect. I think those conversations are really hard to have, and it's great to hear that a lot of your companies are starting from the top and are really implementing those. So kind of to go off of that, what advice or tips do any of you have to have that conversation and start that conversation about diversity, equality, and inclusion in the workplace?
I would say the biggest thing is just being courageous, just having that confidence and courage to speak up when you see something that's going wrong, and being vulnerable in those situations, and understanding that not everybody in the room is going to say the right thing or do the right thing. But as long as you come into those conversations with the intent to be understanding and have a meaningful conversation, that's the part that matters. So just first and foremost, it's just being courageous and having that courage to speak up.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many opportunities where someone may say something, and it's really important to be an upstander rather than a bystander on that one. For large conversations, I think the realization is that everyone's at a different point in their journey. Not everyone is all the way bought in. Some people are, you have a continuum, and that's just the truth. So my biggest piece of advice is, for a lot of people, it's a delicate situation. So, and that's especially true in the context of a workplace. So ensuring that you're entering those conversations, that the table is set, and that it can be a productive conversation, because there's a good chance while entering conversations surrounding DEI, it can be emotional for some people, because there are a lot of these thoughts that are deep seated in them that they tie into. Also, it's there's a lot of things that are tough topics, and some of those topics are hard to bring up. So it's important to make sure that as you're going through those, that there aren't going to be any negative repercussions. Because of this, you need to create the space for it. Qualtrics has a couple ways that we've been creating space, including we've been doing an accountability book club. We have DEI discussion groups that cover a different topic each and every week. Our Q groups are huge surrounding the assistance of having these conversations, especially with clumsy curiosity. We even are starting to see our teams open up these conversations so that they can talk and discuss. But the big thing there is just, again, everyone's at a different point in their journey. So trying to meet them where they're at and educating. So individual action plans are super important, but again, the space that you can create to allow someone to kind of progress in their journey, because it is that movement. We're trying to move everyone forward. We're trying to progress everyone in that journey. So making sure that you can have really productive conversations. These conversations, it can't be a seminar. It can't be a point in time. It's got to be continual to effort. So I guess that's just like a couple things for you.
I would say to add on there as well, definitely be willing to take other perspectives into account. I think one of the main things to look at, DEI from multiple different angles of being, an educational platform, motivational platform, an action-oriented platform. And so, be able to like embrace some of those traits that make us different. And, it sounds like our, 3 companies, for example, are really striving to have as far as a internal community. Another thing I would definitely say, and this is something that personally I have really made as a personal goal within the workplace, is being supportive, more so with my peers. Being an active member of the Women of Brex community, we are very supportive of, I just had a colleague put on her own external conference. And even though I couldn't make it, I made sure that I was signed up to get the recording and really retain and learn from that. And, really be a hold of that within our forum. To Josiah's point as well, as having that safe space is so important within a company. And I know with Brex, what we have also done as examples is, with certain diversity initiatives and, one particular around, some things with the recent times of the BLM movement, we wanted to create like a safe environment for employees, but, with 500 team members, it's a lot of potential voices in a room. And so what we did is we created 3 different platforms. We created a discussion group, 2 discussion groups around like both different sides of the viewpoints of the movement. And then we had a neutral discussion group that was just more so, wanting to learn more. And so it was very welcoming just for, different aspects and perspectives overall.
Perfect. I think all 3 points that you all made are things that I personally haven't thought about, and I think a lot of people haven't either. And so bringing them up is getting that conversation started, which I think is really important. As a student, I feel like a lot of students are watching this live stream today. Interviews are something that we worry about and something that is really hard to kind of bring up a conversation or a topic like diversity and inclusion. Is there any suggestions you have in terms of interviewing?
I think you can just be direct, honestly, and just straight up ask the company how they address diversity and inclusion, what kind of programs they have or policies they have in place. As when you're interviewing, as a recruiter, I would love for somebody to be direct like that for me because I'm direct in all of the questions that I ask about skills and things like that. And when you're interviewing, you're interviewing the company as much as we're interviewing you. So you have to know that, you know, you don't have to settle. And I know that you can feel kind of nervous, especially coming straight out of school. It's terrifying to go out and put yourself out there, but you don't have to settle for a company that isn't going to respect you. Or you have to be comfortable asking those questions so that you know if the company's a right fit for you, not just that you're the right fit for the company.
In an age where we have so much content that is going out in the world, you can check out blogs and use cases and things like that. I think for me, one of the things that I personally love working with is someone who is genuinely curious, like genuinely curious about the role, genuinely curious about the thing that they're working at. And because of that curiosity, you should be to reinforce this, you should be asking questions, because you do not want to join a company where you don't align with their mission, their vision, like those other things. And so you should be asking as many questions as possible. You should be asking tactical things about, what is the role that I'm going to be doing? What does the day-to-day look like? Who is my manager? What is their management style? So you should have a laundry list of questions to identify what your need is. And also beyond that, ask big questions like, where is the company going? Like, where are you going? Where do you see the company going to be in a couple of years? And those are questions that you should be asking as well, because not only is it good to be in a role that is good right now, you want to make sure that you have long-term career progression as well. Even if the average person right out of college works 1 to 2.5 years, but making sure that there's that opportunity for upward mobility. Those should be things that you're asking every company. And then diversity and inclusion, that should be a question, and specifically how the company is approaching it, the different things, and what are expectations surrounding that. So if I were to tell you as you're going into the interview, you should be asking almost as many questions of the interviewers as they are asking of you.
Yes, and I think kind of taking two different lenses on the candidate side and from a recruiting perspective personally. So now with a lot of things being remote, I don't think from a candidate side, you're not experiencing going on site and seeing, people working, seeing the environment at all. So that you're translating a lot of things from that interview, from Glassdoor or blogs around your own research. So it is very important to load those questions that are missing from those external factors within your interview. I think personally for me, like one of the biggest things I look at when I make a move to a company is the people I'm working with, around my immediate team or just within the company overall. And it's really a motivating factor for myself. I think also around, the DEI initiatives is, I think the question that Molly Nabby asked earlier about how does leadership view, diversity is a question that you'll really get all angles of the company, because leadership is not bought in, then it's really speaks volumes from like the company perspective overall. And I also think as well, when we look at, from a recruiting standpoint, I am really looking for people that I'm excited to work with that have like a growth mindset. And I would say humility are like two of the key things that I look for. When I talk to people who, look at Brex from the time we've gone and scaled into their own personal journey and story. And, also people who take that humility standpoint and can look back on projects and said, there could have been a better way I could have done this. This is how I would have made that pivot. And from a recruiter standpoint, to see that you are able to call that out, provide yourself internal feedback moving forward speaks volumes versus, just can you come in and check the boxes on the job description, so to speak. And I think it translates into being a unique working environment that people aren't going to be exactly coming into checking every box on the job description. And we look at, where you can grow into that perspective as well.
Thank you all. That's great advice, and really good to hear too that you look for candidates to ask as many questions as you're asking them, so they don't necessarily have to be scared to ask those questions, because it's better that they do. And especially to your point too, Paige, with everything being virtual nowadays, it's especially crucial to ask those questions, since you don't get to be in person and see the office and meet other people that are working there, to really give you a feel for what that's like. When eventually, hopefully, we do return to in person, or even just kind of working with different team members virtually. A few of the things that we've touched on so far have been like employee resources groups, like your Q groups at Qualtrics, Josiah, and a few of the other discussion groups that both JCPenney and Brex offer as well. So I'm curious to hear about what other maybe employee resource groups or other resources and trainings that your company offers, and if you could touch as well on how new employees can get involved in those.
Well, at Qualtrics, we have 5 Q groups. So Women in Leadership Development, Mosaic, which is for our multicultural Q group. We have Q Pride. We have Q Enable, which is for anyone who has a mental or physical disability. And then we have our Q Salute, which is for veterans. And obviously allyship across all of those. Those are something that you can get involved in from day one. Immediate plug and play, create an immediate community for yourself. We also have an inclusion council, which is from the leadership of each one of those groups. So another way that you really talk about inclusion in the workplace. Beyond that, there are a ton of other things that you can get involved in. We have a green team, which is surrounding sustainability. We have Impact, which is our early tenure employee leadership program that allows people to really progress in their skills. We even have something called Social Cues. The purpose of that one started out as something for people who are relocating to Utah to get plugged into a community across many different departments and many different teams. But now it's really just a place where you can create community across a lot of those. So really, we try to create an ecosystem for our new hires to get any of the resources that they need, as well as help them progress in their career as quickly as they can. So those are high level. Those are a bunch of different ways, and I'm sure I'm probably missing a couple as well.
So at Brex, we have 9 communities that we are excited to celebrate today. So one being Afro at Brex, where we celebrate our Black culture, Asians at Brex, Brex LGBT, our Brexlings, which is our community for parents at Brex, or prospective parents for a support platform. We have NG Women at Brex, Jewish at Brex, Vita, which is our Latinx community, and then also Women at Brex as well. And that's just from like the ERG perspective. There's a lot of educational moments to be a part of those in events, as well as the allyships between, some of those initiatives. I know from being an active member too for Women at Brex, we really strive to, have those tougher conversations on, how to build a, better oneself as well as a better Brex, on, certain panel discussions on how to ask for a promotion, around negotiations, doing some book reads, and, really implementing that into an action plan within Brex. From a learning and development and mentorship standpoint, we have a lot of opportunities to grow, and really in not just professional, your straight mobility career path, but also just internally, more personally. So we have Brex Masters, which is our version of kind of a Toastmasters internally that we do. We also have a mentorship kind of, and actually we have a Brex overall pod mentorship program, or we have a women's side as well that's more on the professional mentorship. And we also do a lot around, various events that support one of these groups, from a whole employee perspective as well. And we are hiring a diversity and inclusion leads individual that is going to be helping us, even more so tie a lot of these back to the mission and, overall vision of Brex going forward.
Yeah, at JCPenney, we have some similar type groups. We have our LGBT allies. We have WINGS, which is a Women's Initiative Networking group. We have a JCPenney Asian American group, an eco group that focuses on environmentally friendly and sustainable products. We have a Hispanic Educational Awareness group, and then our Mosaic group, which is the African American Business group. Along with some of those things, we've had unconscious bias trainings, we've had allyship trainings, and then as I mentioned previously, we have our Diversity and Inclusion Council. And along with that, we have one specifically for like our corporate side, so like the home office and the Salt Lake office. And then we actually have one for our store associates as well, so that they don't feel like they don't have someone to go to. And then along with that, we have our diversity and inclusion mentor group as well. So you can become a mentor or a mentee, of course. And I know I'm forgetting some. I know I'm forgetting some, but those are the main ones. And then, as I said before, we've also been having a lot more diversity inclusion conversations just within, our smaller teams. So like the annual inventory team or the inventory group as a whole, and then also as like the controller groups or the finance groups as a whole as well.
Wow, I had no idea all three of your companies were so inclusive, and that's honestly a great thing to see. And I'm really lucky and fortunate that you were able to share that information with all of us today. I think as a student personally, I would want to be at any of the three places you guys work. So that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. We'll kind of bounce off of that question and kind of go into career opportunities. Do any of your companies currently, are they offering any career options or jobs that you would like to share with us?
Sure, I could take that first. Currently, we are offering our AFMDP, Accounting Finance Management Program. And what that is specifically for like graduating seniors, or if you're still a current senior, just to come in and work with our teams. You'll come in and work on a specific project for a certain team and kind of focus on process improvement with that project. And then you'll move from team to team in our Salt Lake office to kind of get a broad idea of how our company works. So we have like our payroll team, our inventory team, our general accounting. You could be moved within any of those. It's roughly a year, 6 months to a year for this program. And then obviously we would hope to keep you on after that and promote you to like an analyst level. And within that program, we really like to emphasize mentorship and leadership, because that's what we're hoping for, is to sort of groom you and teach you the necessary things to become a manager and stay with JCPenney. And you can find information about that opening on Handshake.
Yeah, so if you would like to find out opportunities about Qualtrics, go to qualtrics.com/careers. We have, if you are a senior and you are graduating, we have a lot of different roles that you can look at. And we also have an internship program, a 12-week internship program during the summer. So those are two opportunities. I would encourage you to go there to see that what role would best suit your interest and what you have skills in. So I would check out that website.
And the opportunities with Brex that we have right now. So we are excited to say we still have our office here in Salt Lake. And now that we are a remote first company, we're going to, actually a hybrid model. So hopefully, as things start to normalize, we'll have the option for employees to go either in an office, be remote, or have a perfect blend of both. So we're open to these roles pretty much anywhere. And some of the ones that I definitely wanted to highlight are with our risk team. So working closely as a risk analyst, we also have a risk lead position that's open as well. Have a great opportunity to collaborate with technical teams as well as teams on our operational and finance side. And we also are actively looking for team members across multiple levels within our customer experience team, our compliance team, more on the investigative and fin crime side, as well as some across sales and our engineering and then product manager roles. So that was very high level, but our career site has, an overview of all of our open roles within those teams as well.
Great. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of awesome opportunities for students as well as alumni to join all three of your companies. So I encourage anyone listening to go ahead and check out those opportunities at their career site or on Handshake as well for JCPenney. And now we'll go ahead and transition into kind of our Q&A portion of the panel. So we'll go ahead and start taking some questions from the chat. Our first one we have is about how to handle inappropriate comments or behavior from colleagues. I know we touched about how to open the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, but what do you do when kind of an inappropriate comment comes up? And I would also be kind of curious to hear, if this happens in the interview, what's your advice as well, since we talked about that too? Maybe it signals that it may not be a company you want to work for, but how do you still handle that professionally?
So conflict resolution is always interesting. So I'll maybe start with as an employee, then I'll move to the interviewer if that's fine. So one, if there is a comment that's said, and there are some things that are blatant, and then there are some things that would be considered microaggressions. If it's a one-on-one situation, I would always encourage everyone to interact in real time. And obviously, you don't want to be you never want to escalate the situation. That's not something that wants to happen. So if you feel comfortable, or even after the conversation has finished, and maybe you have some time to think and breathe, go and talk to that person about hey, this is what was said. This is the takeaway that I got from it. This is how I personally felt at the situation. That's step one. If you don't feel comfortable having that conversation with someone, I would engage your manager or someone from leadership, and then get advice on that. And then if it's just really blatant, so I sit on our people operations team, which is similar to our HR team. Every company has some form or fashion of that. There are escalation methods there. If it happens in an interview, that one's a little bit more tough. Cause it's it really, for me, if that happened in an interview, I'd be like, I don't know if this is the place for me. And that, I think that might be just a really good indicator. And usually interviews happen on someone that you would work with. Usually it's it starts with recruitment and then potentially your potential managers. Hopefully that isn't happening, but if that isn't, if there's a leading point of contact, I might bring it up with them in another conversation. If that is your main point of contact, if I were you, I may look at other opportunities, but I'm not you. So take all of that with a grain of salt there.
I think I could add a little bit too from the recruiting side of what I think would be. So if that was in the scenario and, comes out live within the interview, I think absolutely like take that mentally as a cue, really kind of store it. I would say best would be to continue with the interview, but absolutely look back and see if that's aligned with where you want to go to. Personally, as a recruiter, I love feedback from candidates. Maybe if it's things that areas of opportunity to improve on from our process perspective. So if I were a candidate and that did happen, I would take the time to email that interviewer and just say, hey, I really appreciate your time. However, and this is in case if you don't look forward to joining them, just say, I think that I am misaligned with some of the things that came up in the interview. And I would definitely say why. I think if the recruiter doesn't get that feedback, then it's going to be probably a continuous conversation in other experiences. So I think part of you taking that stance in a positive direction is pointing that out as well.
Definitely. I would echo what Josiah and Paige have said. I think feedback is so important in any situation. And, having those conversations can be really hard, and dealing with inappropriate comments is not something that anybody wants to go through. But I think having that immediate feedback is great if you can, similar to what Josiah was saying. If you feel comfortable just immediately having that conversation after the comment was said, definitely do that. If you can't do that in a respectful manner immediately, then I would say, go back, hold on, calm down, and then go and have that conversation. Because I know I'm the type who can't really get to that immediate because my emotions are still really high, and so I'm like, no, I'm going to get fired or whatever. So I think it's really important to go back, and I like to take the SBI approach where it's you say the situation. So, you were in a team meeting and the behavior, so whatever comment was made, and then the impact that that comment had on you. And that's really been the best way that I've found to give feedback. So it's very specific and clear of what happened and how it impacted you. And I think that the impact is a really important part of that as well. And as far as in an interview goes, I would just again echo what they were saying. It would make it clear to you that the company may not be the place, and I would then just go to your point of contact, the HR person, and say, this was the comment that was made and this was the impact that it had, and this is why I'm potentially turning down this position, and kind of have that open conversation with that person as well.
Completely. I think all three of you brought great, very useful tools that any of us could use both in our careers or in interviews. So thank you so much for that. We do have another question, and the question is, kind of want to hear from each of you about how you became involved with DEI and how your involvement has affected either your engagement with your own company or your engagement with other colleagues.
So I can kick that off. So for myself, being a recruiter, it's naturally come up within a lot of the, company level OKRs and what we're looking for from a recruiting perspective. I personally have seen more of the growth just naturally on my own, like internal kind of curiosity side and getting involved with a lot of these groups. I am actually actively also recruiting for the D&I leads role. So that has really also added other perspectives from just those conversations too. And so I think, having that curiosity, to be honest, has actually led probably more internally to my growth, I would say, than a lot of like what's been aligned with my day-to-day and my current role. And so I think it's definitely been a huge impact for me, as I said, really being supportive to, seeing a lot of these other conversations and initiatives within Brex. And it's also helped me from, becoming a mentor to a few individuals internally on, mobility and a lot of, the tougher conversations around, asking for a promotion and really having a lot of those coaching moments has also internally been a huge impact for myself too.
Yeah, I would say mine's fairly similar. Is just being on this recruiting team, you kind of naturally fall into some of the diversity and inclusion conversations. And then specifically for me, diversity inclusion is very important for me, and having those conversations is very, very important. So, that's how I became involved. I wanted to get involved and speak up and make sure that we are having those conversations in the different aspects of the company and within all aspects of the company, really. So, yeah, that's just how I became involved.
That's a really tough question. I don't know. It's my journey has been a really interesting one, I guess. I would say I would encapsulate it with like the word for this year is empathy. Like that's the word of the year. Like it's a crazy time. You got to be empathetic, but that journey for me really started just about probably 4 years ago, almost about this time. Shortly after I started at Qualtrics, I started on our Women in Leadership Development Events Committee, and I was there for like a year or something along those lines. And I started working, and I was trying to better understand, because at that point in time, I was just a dude. Like I was like, I'm curious about this thing, and I'm also like, I really like event planning. And then it made me more empathetic to the women in the workplace. And still a lot of progress needs to happen there. And then we started, a member of our team started our LGBTQ plus team, and I moved over there. And I was a part of that team I co-lead our chair in Provo. I've been a part of that. And then I got tapped on the shoulder to be a part of our military, which was Miltrix at the time, and now it's Q Salute. And so there's been this really, so DEI has been something for me that has really evolved. And I think when I really talk about, like earlier, we talked about the continuum, like anything surrounding DEI, whether it's your empathy towards people who aren't like you, or your understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion as a whole, no one's at the same spot, and it's a journey. And the first step of any journey is understanding that you don't know what you don't know, and that's okay. There are a lot of times, whether it's with disabilities, whether it's with race, whether it's with orientation, there are so many different facets to all of those different things, and so much specific language that take the first step. And your journey will progress by just understanding. And the key thing to loop all of that around is being empathetic. Whether you're a part of the minority group or whether you're part of the majority group trying to understand the minority group, all of that surrounds being empathetic towards another person and trying to understand what's going on there. So I'll hold fast that the word of the year is empathy. And journeys with DEI, I just kind of gave you a 4-year overview of mine right there. It just starts with the step of being curious. If you're in this session right now, you're already taking the first step forward of being curious, and that's an awesome first step.
Thank you all. And I think that really exemplifies the point too, that diversity and inclusion really has to do with whatever role you're in. I know all three of you are in different roles at your companies and different areas. And so we can really see how it impacts all areas of the company, even whether you're entry level or a C-suite executive, it really can kind of play a big role in wherever you are at that point. I do have one more question from the audience, and we're going to kind of go back to interviews and kind of some advice there as well. Something that we've been kind of hearing from students going through the interview process is, sometimes with things being virtual, an interviewer will ask them to, show their whole outfit to prove that they're wearing something professional, even though you can't see it on the screen. Or things like that. So kind of curious what your advice would be in, how to handle something that's may make you uncomfortable like that. So maybe not necessarily a full out inappropriate comment like we were talking about earlier, but still something that definitely makes you uncomfortable and you want to address at that moment rather than maybe kind of following up, or maybe in addition to following up with your point of contact afterwards.
Very humble perspective. Take it with a grain of salt. It doesn't, like, yes, there's a level of professionalism that you should have in an interview. Should someone care what you're wearing? Probably not. That, I would just say, in an instance like that, use your own intuition and your own desire to work for that company to really let that be a I don't know. You should digest that. That should be something that you take into account as you're going through the process. Yeah, that's my very humble perspective on that one. Again, the candidate experience is very important. The candidate experience is your time. So the attraction experience is you've not put in an application. Candidate experience is you put in an application, you're going through the interview process. So that the candidate experience, the experience that you have there will really set the tone for what your employee experience will look like. And more often than not, what we've seen is that the candidate experience is, in fact, going to be similar to your employee experience in some way, shape, or form of how they conduct the interviews, how they approach some of their questions. That will be because the company will reflect who they are as an organization in the questions that they ask and the people that they put in front of you. So take into account the experience that you have, because it might not be exactly the same, but it'll at least be a leading indicator of your employee experience, at least in, I'll temper this with a grain of salt and say my very humble opinion.
Yes, I think we all had the same thoughts. I just watched our facial reactions when you said that. I personally have not heard that and I don't think our recruiting team has ever brought that up. So to Josiah's point, I think taking it with a grain of salt was the best way to say it. Like, I would mentally definitely check that, but I wouldn't let that alter anything within the interview itself, because I think internally I would look at it being like, I had that conversation at the top of my game, and I'm able to really reflect. To Kia's point earlier, making sure like that company is just as much as the right fit for my next move as well. And if I know from, at least at Brex's environment, there's not a formal dress code or anything. So I see people on interviews come from suit and ties. I see people wearing, shirts. It's really just more so, I think, what really sets you up to be comfortable. But if you have those impressions through your research of the company that is a part of their culture, then I would always, really take that time to look at that and be prepared. And that's part of the interview as well. But if it is brought up in that moment, I would definitely reflect. And as Josiah said, take that with that grain of salt pretty delicately.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. And just to add, if anything happens in an interview that makes you uncomfortable, if you need to respectfully end it, respectfully decline in that moment where you're just like, no, I don't want to show my outfit. Like, that's really weird and that makes me very uncomfortable. I would say that it's perfectly acceptable to say, respectfully, I'm going to end this interview here because we're not a good fit for each other. And that is something that as a recruiter I can respect, and as a person I would probably do. If a comment was made or something happened that truly made me uncomfortable, I would just kind of, sometimes you just have to know when enough is enough, and it's okay to do that in interviews too.
Thank you all. That's really helpful advice, because I think sometimes, especially as a student or someone that's new in your career, it can be really scary going into an interview because you feel like you're not really the one that's in control of the conversation or in power in that situation. So when things happen that make you uncomfortable, it can be hard to speak up. and possibly end that conversation if it gets to that point, or even follow up afterwards with your point of contact. So I think it's really helpful to know that you shouldn't be scared to do those things, even though it is really scary. It's really good in the long term, even for the person that's on the other end of it. It's really helpful to give them that feedback, and really helpful to the company as well, so that they can improve and so that it doesn't kind of continue to happen to other candidates as well. So that brings us to 1 o'clock. So we're going to end it here, but really appreciate all of our panelists for taking the time out of their day to speak with us this afternoon and answer these questions. I'd encourage everyone again to check out the career sites at Qualtrics and Brex for different opportunities that they have available right now, and to check out Handshake for opportunities at JCPenney. Have a great rest of your afternoon.